Thanks so much to all three of you for joining us. Before we get into our panel, where we'll be discussing housing, the municipal election, and how both of these things relate, I'll quickly introduce myself. So my name is Taylor Blewett. I'm a reporter at the Ottawa Citizen, and one of our reporters covering this ongoing municipal election. So quickly, I will also introduce our three panelists. Here with us, we have Jason Burgraff, the Executive Director of the Greater Ottawa Home Builders Association, Meg McCallum, Interim Executive Director of the Alliance to End Homelessness Ottawa, and Sarah Button, Executive Director of the Centretown Citizens Ottawa Corporation. My thanks to you all for making the time for this.
Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for having us.
So want to start it off with a pretty open question, and I love it because I get to turn it over to you and and invite you to if you could put one housing related question out there that you'd like the candidates running for mayor specifically to address at some point during this campaign. What would it be and why?
Pretty simple, really. What will you do to end homelessness, and how soon can you make it happen?
And why, Meg, if you can speak to why that really for you is an important one for those candidates to address.
Well, yeah, the crisis of homelessness is something that's been around for a long time, and the current City Council declared a crisis of housing affordability and homelessness in January 2020. A lot has changed in the world since then. But we're still sitting in the midst of a very serious housing and homelessness crisis that we really need to act on. And now is the time to get it done.
Sarah, Jason, anything come to mind for you?
I mean, I can build on what Meg said effectively because I agree with her. And I think that's a great question, very succinctly put. I would build on that to say, what will you do to support the community housing providers across Ottawa in achieving that elimination of homelessness and chronic homelessness in Ottawa? Because housing providers like Centretown Citizens Ottawa Corporation, CCOC, and all of the other nonprofits and co-ops and housing providers across the city, we are the folks who provide the long-term affordable housing to folks as they're moving out of homelessness. So we're not necessarily the emergency providers, but we're right there. And so making sure that organizations like mine are able to continue to provide the high quality housing that we provide to folks who have low incomes and moderate incomes is really, really critical in terms of keeping folks out of homelessness over the long term.
Well, then I'll wrap up and sort of broaden the question a bit of, how does your plan, presuming someone's put out their plan at this point, or all of them have, how does it fulfill the housing need that we're going to have over the next 20 years for somewhere between 400 and 500,000 new residents of Ottawa? Will it provide the number of homes that we need so that everyone does have a chance to live in a home that's comfortable and affordable for their means? So I would just broaden it out to be to cover kind of the entirety of the population growth that we're expected to see, and really emphasize that the decisions we make today are going to affect the growth that we see in 10, 20 years from now.
Many contentious files of the last council term have been related to housing in a number of different ways, from the expansion of the urban boundary and the lands included in that expansion to the redevelopment of Herongate and the use of motel-priced apartments to house homeless families. Just a sampling of some of these files that really generated a lot of debate, both among our elected municipal politicians, but also community engagement and other voices from outside City Hall. So I'm curious to know from all three of you, what housing files are you expecting to create a lot of conversation and maybe some controversy at City Hall this term?
Can I jump in on that one to start? So, I mean, I don't think it'll be so shocking. I think it'll just be a continuation of the issue with intensification and achieving that balance of what is the level of intensification we need versus perhaps what that community desires in terms of density and the characteristics of those buildings, how they interact with the street, what kind of increased population demands on that neighborhood in terms of rec facilities and transportation and what have you. So, that's been the issue over the past term of council. And really before that even, and I'm sure it will continue to be as we move into the next 4 years.
Sarah or Meg, anything that you're kind of watching, expecting to come before our new council?
I personally think it's going to be really interesting to see how the LeBreton Flats parcels evolve. There's still a lot coming there, right? And those are long processes. There are multiple partners involved. We've seen some really interesting and sometimes contentious, right? Like evolutions of partnerships and then and dissolutions and then changes and shifts in terms of how this is going to be developed. I mean, I think it is still the largest urban brownfield redevelopment site in the country, and it's you know right within sight of the Parliament buildings. It's within striking distance of all of these national institutions, but it's also was historically and is adjacent to a densely populated residential neighborhood. So it will continue to be a lot of residential proposed for that area. And so I think watching those files continue to evolve have the potential to be really, really interesting and really indicative of where the city is going with some of the new policies in the official plan and some of the priorities around housing, especially when we think about providing housing for folks with different levels of income, with different housing needs and different trying to provide housing choices, which I think is a little bit what Jason was getting at a moment ago, right? It's making sure that we've got choices for folks of all descriptions in all contexts, and making sure that what we're building is not just homogenous housing, because folks really have different wants and needs when it comes to their homes. And so making sure that when we're developing these new sites, we're thinking intentionally about what sorts of income levels we can support there, what sorts of housing types we can offer, what kinds of options are embedded within that. And I think those have the potential to be both fascinating and also possibly contentious as they start to wind their way through the process.
And not to put you on the spot, Sarah, but CCOC, right? They were one of the parties that was interested in getting involved in the residential development at the LeBreton Flats, correct?
Yeah, we were part of one of the part of one of the partnerships for sure. They're interesting processes to be part of. Most of that happened before I was in this role, so I don't have a lot I can say about that one.
Meg, anything you want to add?
Yeah, in terms of contentious files that will move forward, just this past June, there were two big discussions at Planning Committee on the same day. One on the potential development of an inclusionary zoning policy at the city, and the second report on how to respond to and manage and prevent what we're calling renovictions and demevictions, really looking at what's possible in terms of tenant protections at the municipal level, and what role the city's building department can play in assisting with challenges around tenants being displaced during renovations, and where the right to housing fits within that. In terms of the inclusionary zoning, that decision was kind of pushed off to the next term of council, and really there's so much potential there. Sarah mentioned the development at LeBreton Flats, and there are also some other very major significant parcels of property in the downtown core that are looking to be redeveloped, thinking Confederation lands and Tunney's pasture. Those are really large sites, and there's a lot of potential for intensification and redevelopment there. But specifically, if we're talking about development around major transit areas, is where we're looking at the city implementing the inclusionary zoning policies. And so there's a lot of potential for the inclusion of housing that is affordable and accessible, that includes housing with larger unit sizes to accommodate low-income families in all of these major developments, some of them on public lands, some of them on private lands adjacent to transit sites that have, that they're the most walkable areas in the city, And so we need to be making room for the diversity of the community on those sites.
And we'll come back to inclusionary zoning because I know there are a few different perspectives on it, and even among the three of you, I think there's probably some alternate perspectives. But I just want to quickly touch on with the discussion around rent evictions and dumb evictions and trying to craft some sort of policy tool to address this. Meg, I would think you'd be a great person to just offer viewers a little bit of context on, why is this coming up at City Hall now? Why is this something that staff and council members were looking at from your perspective?
Well, I think if we're talking about rental stock in general, not specifically to the nonprofit sector, and actually if we're speaking specifically about private market rental stock, a lot of the purpose-built stock was built around 1960 or earlier. So we're talking about stock that's 50 years or older, and a lot of it is in poor to moderate condition. So when it gets to the point where someone is ready to sell off the building or to make a major investment in repairs and renovations, often what's happening is they are removing homes that just through attrition have become some of the most affordable housing available on the private market in the city. So when these changes are happening, either demolishing for building a new site or renovating and building and renovating to a sort of high quality, luxury type of unit, the tenants who are in situ and paying very moderate rents are displaced, and really there's nowhere for them to go. The vacancy rate for low and moderate units is almost 0% in the city. So there is nowhere to go.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you for providing some of that background. I know a lot of the conversation has been around, yes, there are some existing requirements, protections, but, what does that look like when it comes to, what it offers people, what more is needed? So a really, really one of the storylines that I'm sure we'll see continue to play out at City Hall. Moving into the next question, candidates, they run to get elected typically, but they also contribute ideas about how to address challenges in our city or how to make it an even better place to live. So whether from those running for mayor or in ward races, can you point to a proposal or two related to housing in some way that you've seen brought forward that you think is a really good idea and should be bookmarked by decision makers regardless of the results on election night?
So far in the two major mayoral platforms that have come out between Catherine McKinney and Mark Sutcliffe, both really spoke to the need to look at housing, look at the municipalities' developments approvals process, the need to speed up the timelines, the need to, make sure it doesn't take up as much staff resources, the need to look at what the costs are on those timelines. Because every day, every week, every month that an approvals process drags on, it adds cost to the final price of whether that's a rental or a home at the end of the day. So both the candidates so far have kind of spoken to that. Many ward candidates also kind of recognize that situation, especially ones who have been involved in planning before. Before COVID, the city hit its mandatory timelines like 50% of the time for the approvals process. So it's an issue that I'm very glad to see everyone acknowledge and recognize as something that they have to address. It can, obviously, the devil's in the details, and it's going to get you really will have to get into the weeds in order to address those, really identify, where are the bottlenecks in terms of legal approval or, engineering or what have you. And the city staff from OP policies have started to kind of have those conversations. But it's really going to take someone to say, look, we need to hit these timelines, make it happen. And, and let's really nail it to the wall. Because we've had those conversations, for years.
Yeah, we know it's something the province has definitely been kind of training its sights on as well. So how?
And the province is, with Bill 109, you could describe that the province has kind of has a carrot and a bit of a stick now too, for municipalities to get their acts together in terms of the development approvals process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other ideas, Meg or Sarah, that you've heard on the campaign trail that you think, yeah, love to hear it. Hope this not to take ideas from it, but
I'm gonna,
lives on.
I was going to say something a little bit more general and not necessarily specifically tied to a platform that I've seen, but I think building a little bit on that is that, sometimes in housing, housing is very complex. It's interjurisdictional, right? We deal with all levels of government, federal, provincial, municipal, local. Everyone is engaged in this issue at every level. And I think there can sometimes be a sense that it's, the responsibility for solving it or the responsibility for coming up with creative ideas maybe is outside the jurisdiction that you happen to be dealing with at the moment. But I think there's so much potential within a municipality to come up with creative solutions. There is quite a lot that's within municipal control, and so whether that's whether that's development approvals process, as Jason was describing, which is, supported by the province, or whether that's looking at things like inclusionary zoning, which is, something that the city and the province have also been working on. Whether that's something like thinking about how the city can help gap fill some of the programs that exist at other levels. So, one of the big gaps we have in programs for affordable housing at the moment is around acquisitions. When there are properties available that, and this ties back to the renovictions conversation and discussion that Meg was sharing as well, right? When there are properties that might be at risk of losing those really affordable units, right now there's no federal program that provides support for nonprofit or community housing providers to purchase those properties. Things that go on the market, they move very quickly sometimes. And so, nonprofits or community housing providers may not be able to react as quickly as someone else. So that's a place where the municipality could potentially step in to help gap fill. So, it doesn't all have to be on one level, or it doesn't all have to be on a different level of government. We can think about building this, collage of ways of addressing challenges within the housing sector, using some of the tools that are in the municipal toolbox and thinking creatively about, what are those really targeted areas for action.
So what I was hoping to close with, and am hoping to close with, is kind of a lightning round where I ask you, like I'll put it a kind of housing policy topic, and would love, if you're interested, jump in with a couple of sentences to describe what you'd like to see. You're all obviously coming at this from a very different position. What you'd like to see from the next council on this issue. So I want to start with inclusionary zoning, as we talked a little bit about earlier. Floor's open. Keep it short.
I'm happy to go ahead. So what the Alliance is interested in seeing is a really strong inclusionary zoning policy that ensures that new builds include affordable housing that's deeply affordable and permanently affordable, and possibly that also includes family-sized units.
I'll just tag on perhaps that just to the city to recognize that inclusionary zoning obviously isn't going to be the silver bullet that solves the affordable housing. It's a tool in that toolbox, but there are going to be other avenues to provide more units than what IZ will in the end of ends.
I'll let that one go. They've said it.
Okay, and then the other one I want to ask about is single family zoning. Stick with zoning. So this is a land use rule for our viewers that applies to nearly half the lots in existing neighborhoods in Ottawa and allows only single detached homes to be built on them. Single family zoning. What do you want to see from the next council?
If everyone will hesitate, I'll jump in on it. I would love to see it eliminated. Depending on who you kind of talk to, it's somewhere between 60 and 90% of all of Ottawa is, that R1 zoning. It's not eliminating single detached homes. It's just eliminating that it'll be exclusively single detached homes. The city is counting on a good 25 to 40% of its housing goals over the next 25 years in the OP to be intensification within existing neighborhoods.
Yeah, I agree with Jason on that one. I think, making it more permissive and more accessible to add units in single family zoning areas is really important. As you say, it's going to be almost impossible to hit intensification targets without without that. And it's a little bit like the IZ conversation we just said, where there are lots of other opportunities to add units in larger numbers in other ways, but we're in a housing crisis and a municipally declared housing emergency. We need to throw everything we've got at this. If we actually intend to solve it and make a difference, we need to use every tool we've got. And that's a big one because of just the sheer volume of land that is occupied under that zoning.
It's a great way to finish it off. My thanks to all of you again for being here, sharing your insight. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the rest of the campaign plays out.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.